right, are you ready to get to the Word? There is a need. The next thing that Todd and Kristen want to do is there's a house they would like to build for this mom who's raising her two boys by herself, and it's about a $7,000 need, and we would love to send money to that just to get them into a house. They built a number of houses for people, so if you're here and that speaks to you, you can just write on one of the tithing envelopes, Nicaragua, and drop some money in the offering for that, and we'll get it to them. So, all right, we're going to return to our series on the kingdom today. We're going to move from, we've been talking about all the characteristics that Jesus said we must have in our lives if we are going to be part of His kingdom. And there are characteristics that are intermingled, if you will, into the parables, but we're moving into the parables. And there's about 6 or 7 different parables, some are combined, that I want to take some time and teach on. A parable is an earthly story, so you're using earthly pictures, earthly analogies, but the meaning is heavenly. So when you read the parables, you can't interpret them like thought for thought. Jesus said this, and that's what's going to happen in this realm. It's an earthly story with a heavenly meaning. And in Matthew chapter 25, which was part of that week at the end of His life, Jesus told 2 parables. The first parable was the one He told about the 10 young ladies that were waiting for the bridegroom, and some were not prepared when He came. The second parable is the one that we're going to read this morning. My title today is America's Got Talents. America's Got Talents. Matthew 25, verses 14 through 30. For it will be, and He introduced this theme in the first verse when He's talking about the kingdom of heaven will be like the 10 girls. The kingdom of heaven will be like a man going on a journey who called his servants and entrusted to them his property. Not their property, but his property. To one he gave 5 talents, to another 2, to another 1, to each according to his ability. So the master knew something about these servants. Then he went away. He who had received the 5 talents went at once and traded them and made 5 talents more. So also he who had 2 talents made 2 talents more. But he who had received the 1 talent went and dug in the ground and hid his master's money. Now after a long time, the master of those servants came and settled accounts with them. Verse 20. And he who had received the 5 talents came forward, bringing 5 talents more, saying, Master, you delivered to me 5 talents. Here, I have made 5 talents more. His master said to him, Well done, good and faithful servant. You have been faithful over a little. I will set you. Everybody say that with me. I will set you. You want to be set by God? Yeah. I will set you over much. Enter into the joy of your master. Kind of a neat picture there. And he also, who had 2 talents, came forward saying, Master, you delivered to me 2 talents. Here I have made 2 talents more. His master said to him, Well done, good and faithful servant. You've been faithful over a little. I will set you over much. Enter into the joy of your master. He also, who had received the 1 talent, came forward saying, Master, I knew you to be a hard man, reaping where you did not sow and gathering where you scattered no seed. So I was afraid, and I went and hid your talent in the ground. Here, have what is yours. But his master answered him, You wicked and slothful servant, you knew that I reap where I have not sown and gather where I scattered no seed? Then you ought to have invested my money with the bankers. And at my coming I should have received what was my own with interest. So take the talent from him and give it to him who has 10 talents. For to everyone who has, more will be given, and he will have an abundance. But from the one who has not, even what he has will be taken away. And cast the worthless servant into outer darkness, in that place where there will be weeping and gnashing of teeth. I'm going to begin by describing what a talent is. What is it? Well, for us, it's one thing. Remember, it's an earthly story with a heavenly meaning. But apparently, a talent was a lot of money in that day. And the reason that we know that is because when you go to Matthew 18, you remember the story where Jesus talked about the servant that was forgiven a bunch of money. He owed all of this money, and he went and pleaded for mercy, and his master forgave him and let him go. And then he found somebody that owed him a little bit, and he beat him, saying, "Pay me what you owe me." In that story in Matthew 18, the man that was forgiven of a lot was forgiven of, I think it was 10 talents. And in your study Bibles and commentaries will tell you, in fact, in your ESV study Bible, go to Matthew 18, it tells you that a talent was worth 20 years' wages, one talent. If you make $25 an hour, that's $50,000 a year times 20 years. One talent in this day would be $1 million if you make $25 an hour. $1 million. And he gave the first guy 5 talents. That's a lot of dough, isn't it? Now remember, it's a earthly story with a heavenly meaning. So God's not going to show up here next week and start doling out talents. Like, you're not all going to get millions of dollars here. It sounds pretty good, but that's not the way it's going to work, unless by chance you were to take the million that God gives you and then give it away, because that's usually what he wants us to do with what he gives us. But it was about a lot of money. And I like the idea that it was 20 years' wages, because in the Old Testament, in Judaism, there was this 20-year period for priests, for example. That was their career. Now, just kind of think this through. God gives you talents that follow you all of your life. Is that not true? He gives us abilities and skills and talents, and he wants us to use them for his kingdom. We are stewards of his property. It's his money. He owns it. And so that's what this little earthly story is about. That God has entrusted us with things. Really, it's not America's Got Talents. It's every human being that is alive, that's ever lived, has received from God these things that he wants them to use for his purposes and his kingdom. So I want to talk about that for 2 weeks. You could probably talk about it for several weeks, but I've broken my thoughts up into 2 categories. There are talent killers, things we can do that kill our talents, and there are talent builders. And we all know there are things that we can entertain or we can invite into our lives that kill the utility or usefulness of the things that we have, our talents in the natural. And there are also things that we can do that build up our talents. In the natural, I'm speaking. Like talent builders include being coachable. Kids that have all the talent in the world, but they're not coachable, it kills their talent. But when you get whether it's a kid in sports or someone in business, there's one of our church members who's entered this new job, and he was just telling me a couple of weeks ago, I want to know everything I don't know so I can be better at the job. You know, that's coachability. He's going to grow his talent, if you will. So being coachable, being disciplined, having diligence, having tenacity, like Martine's well. There's something there that brought this legacy for him and his family and now his grandchildren. He worked at it. It was only 2 years, but there was diligence and discipline every day. That's a talent builder. A talent killer is the opposite of that. Talent killers could be fear of failure, fear of rejection, fear of man. Talent killers could be pride. In fact, talent killers in one person can kill all the talent in the rest of the people, like on a sports team. Isn't that true? So it can be pride. It can be fear of man. It can be insecurity. Talent killers can be negative circumstances that you have endured your life. Those things they can take what God gave you and wipe them out. And in the same way, but kind of in the same way, there are things that we can do that kill the talents that God has given us. And there are things we can do that can cause them to explode with growth. And so for the next 2 weeks, I'm going to break that up. Today, I want to talk about talent killers. I have 3 of them, and they all begin with the letter F. And that fits, doesn't it? Because anything that kills your talent ought to get the letter F. There's fear, there's false narratives, and there's forgetting. Number 1, let's look at fear. I start with that because that was the reason the one servant said he did what he did. Again, verse 24 and 25. Master, I knew you to be a hard man, reaping where you did not sow and gathering where you scattered no seed. So I was afraid, and I went and I hid your talent in the ground. He was afraid of a person. He was afraid of the master. We do the same thing. We're afraid of things. And because of our fear, it kills our talents. We've all known incredibly talented people whose fears have killed their talents in every category possible. Sports, business opportunities, investment opportunities, relational opportunities. God puts somebody in your life, and they're like it's a David and a Jonathan relationship, because there's this fear that you have towards other people. You're afraid to talk to them. You're afraid to take a risk. You're afraid to step out. And here's this gift that God has brought into your life. It's a relationship opportunity, but because of your fear, it doesn't materialize. It happens in every category. Isn't that true? And it happens in our spiritual lives. I think it's interesting what this guy did with his talent. The Bible says he buried it. Like, why do we bury things? A guy in our church, his mom passed away a number of years ago, and I don't know if it was his mom or his dad, you could correct me later, but one of his parents had buried cans of money all over their shop, like just tubs of rare coins and silver dollar bills. And why did they bury them out on their property? Because they didn't want anybody else to know that they had them. That was their way of saving things. And we bury things because we don't want anyone else to know what we have. And I think some things should be buried. There's some things that we carry around. We should just dig a hole and throw them in there and get rid of them, right? But we bury good things. We bury things that we don't want others to see. And we do that because we don't want to fail. Like, if you don't know I can fill in the blank, then I won't be asked to fill in the blank. And I can't fail, and I can't be embarrassed, and I can't be mocked, I can't be ridiculed. I'm just going to conceal it. I'm going to bury it. I'm not going to let anybody know that I have that talent. Right now in this room, if I had some kind of Superman vision and I could see your top 2 or 3 talents that each of you carry, it'd probably blow me away. Like, I had no idea you could do that. But we conceal those things so that we don't get called into account and we don't have to use them. Now watch this. The creator of all things, his name is Jesus, singled you out, because we all have different talents, don't we? You can do things I can't do. All of you can do. It's just so beautiful, this tapestry of talents that are represented in any community, in any room. The creator of the universe has singled you out, and he's given you this amazing ability, this amazing talent that very few other people have. And it's not that you hate that talent. It's something inside of you. You love it. You wish that it could come out somehow, but because of your fear of man, your fear of something, you dig a hole and you throw that thing in there so no one knows that you have it. And when you do it, your fear kills your talent. It happens, doesn't it? Just this idea of burying things. Like when you, just to change the analogy a little bit, when you bury things, it usually means they're dead, right? They're gone. They're not ever coming back to life. There's been a few times in my life I've done something once, and I've said, man, I'm never doing that again. That was terrible. That sounded terrible. That was the worst thing. I felt like God was leading me to do something. I'm going to bury that. That's never coming back to life. I just wonder today, how many people have talents that no one is aware of, and you've buried them? Like it just bugs me to know that you have these wonderful skills and abilities and gifts that God has given you. And somehow the deceiver of deceivers has lied to you. And he has gotten you to act on that thing. And so you've decided you will never use it again. It's fear. Kills our talents. It deserves an F, wouldn't you say so? The next one is false narratives. False narrative is just a story that either you have heard or a story that you have told, but it isn't true. And when it comes to our talents, we can believe and say things about God that are not true. We can invent our own narrative, and that becomes our excuse not to surrender our talents to Him. That was the case with the one servant in this story. Now follow me. We just read how he said his master was hard. He did what he did. But notice in verse 18, when he first buried his talent, he didn't make any mention of being afraid of the master or how hard he was. He just buried his talent. Maybe that's why Jesus in the story said he was a slothful servant. Maybe it was never about the master being hard. It was always about this character flaw in the servant. It's easy for you to say, right? I think the text supports that, actually. Because the other two guys that took their talents and invested them and they doubled what the master had given them, they didn't say anything about the master being hard, did they? You ever worked in a company where the boss was just horrible? Doesn't everybody know the boss is horrible? 5 out of 10 or 9 out of 10. The guy's an ogre. He's hard to work with. He's unpredictable. He's impetuous. Whatever it is for you. Like everybody knows that. Surely they would have known it. And surely they would have said it. There's always one. You can have 100 great employees. There's always one that's like, I think that's the case here. I also think it's interesting that when those other two showed back up and the master began to hold them accountable or talk about what they had done, notice what the master said to them when they gave him their talents. The master said, "Well done, my good and faithful servant. Now I want you to enter into my joy." The picture there of entering into this place of joy. It's not I'm going to give you joy for a day. I'm not going to give you joy for a season. I'm going to give you joy that you can carry. You're going to be happy for a moment. Here's something that I'm going to give you to take with you. It's not that. It's more like I'm going to bring you into this place of joy, of happiness, of fulfillment, of purpose. You are going to live in that because you trusted your talents. They're the talents I gave you. You trusted them back to me. Now, just think about this. Does that sound like an ogre? Does that sound like somebody who's hard to work for? The reward was a life of joy. That was what he gave them. So I think this was a false narrative. I think it was something this guy invented. It was an excuse for him to use so he didn't have to use the talents that the master had given him. And again, this is an earthly story with a heavenly meaning, and we know who the master in the story is. It's our loving Father. He's more kind and patient and loving and benevolent than any of us deserve. Yet, This slothful, wicked servant, as Jesus identified him, not me, chose to frame the master in that false narrative. And it killed his talent. Same thing happens today. People who have been the recipients of some of the most awesome traits, abilities, talents, say things about the God who gave those talents to them that is absolutely false. But they use those false narratives as their reason not to surrender to God. Here's the narrative that people use to say they won't surrender to God or surrender the gifts He's given them to Him. They say God's a killjoy. There is no joy. He takes all the fun out of living. He's angry. It's all about rules. You ever thought those things? You hear those things said about God? It's all about rules. It's all about control. If I surrender to Him, He'll ruin my life. Lots and lots of young kids believe that false narrative. I can't give this box up to Him. I can't give that box. I can't give that talent to Him, because if I give that to Him, He's just going to ruin my life. Like, just look around. You know anybody who God has ruined their life? I don't. I know a whole lot of people He's brought incredible blessing to their life. Doesn't mean that they avoid other speed bumps and pitfalls along the way, but He's brought incredible blessing. I don't know anybody whose life He's ruined, but that's the narrative. That's the story that's told. People that aren't Christians, they have a great ability. They just think, I'm not going to surrender to that God, not Him. I know what that's all about. And now in our day, there's this, a whole collection of other false stories, false narratives about who our God is. People say that God is a racist. Like, where does that come from? Have you read your Bible? God's a misogynist. Like, He suppresses women. Like, women are held up in the Bible. Like, there's higher honor given to women than all the men put together. He's the opposite of that. But somebody got a hold of that false narrative, and they're like, I wouldn't serve that God. He's a misogynist. Like, no, I don't want anything to do with Christianity. He's a racist. He suppresses the poor. Whatever it is, those are the things that we hear today. He promotes violence. He's against the underprivileged. And people hear those things. So they decide, I'm not gonna use that. I'm not gonna support or use my talents for that God. Not that any of those things are true. They don't have to be true. They just believe the false narrative. And they kill their talents, and they miss out on the joy the Master has for them. It just should blow us all away that some of the people who are the most talented in our world right now today are the most miserable. How could life be that bad? My boss used to say that money won't make you happy, but you can sure be miserable in a lot of nice places. How could you be miserable there? I mean, you have more talent in your finger than I have my whole body. Like, I couldn't begin to do the things you're doing. But because they won't surrender them to the Master, they can't enter His joy. It's a talent killer. Fear, false narratives, and then forgetting. Forgetting who gave us the talents and who owns them. Verse 14. The master entrusted the servants to care for his property. Verse 18. The servant dug a hole in the ground and hid his master's money. Verse 27. The master told the wicked servant, you should have invested my money. Now clearly, non-Christians don't believe their talents came from God. There's somebody that has just a great skill set in business. They just, we all know people like that. They're not Christians, but they just know how to make things work. Or there's people that are so talented musically, or people are so talented in sports, and whatever it is. And people think, God didn't give me that talent. Lots of people think that. I developed that talent. I'm the one that was in the gym, hour after hour, week after week, year after year. I developed that talent, or I was born with that ability, or I got it from grandma or grandpa. But non-Christians don't believe that God gave them, or some do, but many don't. Like, God God didn't give me that. Was God there when I was doing all that hard work? Was God there when I got my MBA? Was God there when I went to med school? Was God there when I went to law school? Whatever it is, like, don't tell me God gave me that. That's just how lots of non-Christians believe. But I'm not sure Christians believe that God gave us our talents. At least if you judge that by the way we serve, you think you could ask the question honestly. God gave you this talent. Do we agree on that yet? Did you do anything to deserve it? Okay, you were faithful. You grew it. We could agree on that. There was some stewardship involved. Who owns it? Do you own any of it? Okay. Then why is it when it comes to using our talents, our time, our resources, it's like we feel like we're doing God a favor to give him a little bit? Well, how could we think that way if we think they belong to him? All right, I'll serve one Sunday a month, but you better know it's a big sacrifice for me to do that. I'll go mow her lawn, but I'm just going to do it this one time. I got stuff to do, you know. Like, I'll buy groceries for him or her, whatever it is. All right, God, I'm in, but don't ask too much of me because I'm a busy guy. I mean, is that crazy? But we kind of do that with the Lord. I'd illustrate it this way. A talent's $1 million, so Justin, I'm going to give you a talent. You guys all are aware of this. Don't try to cash a check, but I'm going to give you $1 million, okay? It's yours to use, to steward, to care for, to grow. And everyone in this room knows that I gave it to you. It's my money. I'm going to bless you with it. You got it? You understand? Okay? So Justin now has $1 million, and his life is transformed by that gift and that talent and that ability. How could it not be? And you see it. Like, look at Justin. Wow, can you believe how his life has changed? Can you believe what's happening to him? Can you believe how good things are? You see it. You're like enjoying this process with him. And you know that I gave it to him. Everybody's aware of that. And then I come back to Justin in a few months and I say, hey, Justin, do you think that you could take $100 of the $1 million that I gave you and maybe help Everett out this week? He's in a tight spot. And Justin's like, boy, I don't know. You're asking a lot of me. Like, I suppose I could sacrifice $100 of the $1 million that you gave me. If you saw that, what would you think about Justin? Don't say it. You would think he's the most selfish, I don't know if narcissistic means, or self-centered, or evil, or wicked, slothful servant alive. Wouldn't you think that? Like, where do you think you got that money? What would you feel like if you're the one that gave him the $1 million? Could you see why the master was so mad at the servant who buried the talent? That's my talent. Love this kind of message, because okay, you're preaching to my kid now, Kirk. That's a good thing. But I'm preaching to you now. I asked first service if old people still have talents, and they said, yeah, we do. Whatever God asks you, it belongs to him. He doesn't even ask for half of it back, does he? It's just, I'm not talking about money now. He blesses us, and it's just like, okay. I guess I'll take my talent as a painter and I'll go help so-and-so. Or, let's say I have a little talent in communicating the Bible, teaching. I mean, it's not huge. I'm not at the 5 talent level. I'm not speaking about Kirk. Maybe I'm not even worth $1 million. So somewhere below that, something below that. I got this little talent, and this is reality for me. Okay. Because there's a little talent there, occasionally I get asked to speak at other things. What you don't know is, if I get asked to speak at something, that's not like show up and speak for 30 minutes and go home. It's like, Kirk, would you come give me 5 days of your time? That's just how it is. You study, it weighs on you. It's a weighty thing. You go over it and you type it and you go over it again and you go over it again and again and again. And I've never taught the same sermon twice in my life. It's just something the Lord, a conviction I had. I'm not patting myself on the back. It's just that's the thing that's now the little talent I have. And occasionally, like once in 2020, I think it was, somebody asked me to come speak at an event, and I'm exaggerating now, but it's a weighty thing. And I've never said no. I can't. I'm almost nervous to say that, because I can just see God in a sense of humor, like flooding my email with requests to speak on Tuesday morning at the nursing home. I don't know how it's going to happen, but I can't say no because it's not my talent. It's just one that I have. I got 2 more somewhere. I got to find them. I buried them, but it's not about getting you to volunteer at church. That's not the point of this message. Most of our talents aren't used or on display here. We're not looking for volunteers. It'd be odd that we'd just get all of our talents out and this is a talent show at Calvary Open Bible. That's a little odd, isn't it? They wouldn't be of a lot of value here. Your talents are the things that God gives you, your abilities and hospitality and whatever it is. Like, God wants you to use them in the market center, in your spheres of influence. He wants to use you and be glorified through you to grow His kingdom, to grow what He's given you. So my motivation isn't, there's no sign-up sheet at the end of today. I just want to challenge us that we don't own what we have. They're just not yours. And I think about Todd, our missionary down there. He's a talented man. Holy smokes. His dad had multiple businesses on the coast. He just has an acumen for business. He has an acumen for construction. He has an acumen for mechanical stuff. That kid is just loaded with talent. And for this season of his life, God just called him to go to Nicaragua. And it's the best thing for him, his wife, and his kids. That's how it is with God. When He calls one, He calls all of us, if we respond. And He's calling people today in this room just to give their talents to Him. So if He were to walk in here today and just call us to an account, how would we fare? How many of us have just buried our talent? We don't want to be embarrassed. We don't want to use them. How many of us have come up with our own false narratives? Like, that's why I don't use it. I got hurt in church. I'm not going to do it anymore. How many of us have forgotten that they didn't belong? They never belonged to us. They've always belonged to Him. Follow me? I ran out of time. I don't know what happened. Worship team, come up, would you? Hopefully you enjoyed it as much as I think I did, so. I'm not half sarcastic, I'm whole sarcastic. Would you bow your heads and close your eyes? it would be very fleshly of me to dismiss this without asking you to respond. How many would say, I buried my talent because I'm afraid, or I've been afraid of people or failure or ridicule? Or would you just raise your hand? Just the fact that you're willing to admit it is breaking something right now. I want to speak that over you. You raise your hand, and then something is broken that needs to be broken. How many would say, it's not fear, I just created my own narrative. I believe something. I even know it's not true, but I believed it, and I use that as my excuse not to give my talents to God. If you're here, would you just raise your hand? And the third one is maybe you've just forgotten that they were never yours to begin with. We have to keep remembering that. Because we are people of flesh and blood, and we have natural emotions and natural thoughts, and so it can be a challenge to remember that they don't belong to us. But if you're here today and you would say, I just have owned this thing, I've treated it like I own it. I've treated it like it's mine to do with what I want to do. And today, the Holy Spirit is speaking to me about giving that back to the Lord. If that's you, would you just raise your hand? Okay. It's different people. I've done all three, probably. Probably do all three again. But I keep coming back to this idea that, God, I want to just surrender my life to you. I want to be all that I can be. And the only way that happens is through surrender. We just stand and we're going to sing one more song, and then I'm going to pray. But as the team sings that song, if you'd rather just meditate and process what the Holy Spirit is speaking to you, I invite you to do that. If you want to sing, do that. But please let the Holy Spirit minister to you in this next couple of minutes.